Another tip for becoming a good active listener is to give good feedback. So when somebody is talking, if you just say, yeah, 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 that's not good feedback. That's just being polite, but not actively listening. You're not paying attention to what's happening in the story. Good feedback would be if the story is a sad story, you give condolences, you say, I'm sorry to hear that, that sounds terrible, sounds very difficult, what happened next, what did you try, where, right? Questions are good. If it's a happy event, congratulations, that's wonderful, what's the next step, where will you go from here, what will you do? Yeah, a way of showing that you are paying attention, a way of following along with the story. Those are good ways to also keep your mind going and engaged in the event. If you're finding it hard to focus, what you should do is, I have this list of tips. If you're finding it hard to focus, repeat the point, repeat the main point that you just heard. So, oh, you just went on a trip to Vermont. Oh, that's great. Well, what was that like? What did you do there? Okay. So, active listening is a great way to connect with the person you're talking to. It's what you want from your audiences. So, practice doing it so that you can learn more about it and then you can work your presentation or conversation magic to engage your audience as much as possible. All right. That was my first part, my first point. First point. My second point is how to build your vocabulary. The number one way to build your vocabulary is reading. There is a lot of information out there. You should be reading it. Obviously, every homework sheet has a reading section. Hopefully, you've been reading all of those. If you have, then you are already in a better position than you were before you were reading. The before reading level is here, after reading level is here. Already you're improved. Okay. When you're reading, you're going to find so many words you don't know. So many words you don't know. One of the first thing that goes is looking up words in a dictionary. You start very enthusiastic, and by the end, you're already like, I have a million words, I'll never remember them all, I can't handle it. So let me tell you this, for every article you read, let's say 4 paragraphs. If you can read 4 paragraphs of each article, you're already doing very well. In those 4 paragraphs, find 1 or 2 words that you don't know and look those up. That's it. All the other ones, just skip it or try to figure it out with context. 2 words per every article you should look up. You should have a place where you write down the word, write down the definition. As you go, this isn't 1 week, this isn't 1 year, but over the years, your vocabulary will improve so much. You don't realize it, but that's just the same thing that happened with your native language. You started in kindergarten, preschool, reading books about cats running up a tree, and you go to university and you learn that the didactic philosophy of whoever, blah, blah, blah. The point is, the spectrum of vocabulary is huge. As an adult, you're reading from the later part of that spectrum, and so, yeah, it feels much harder to catch up, but it just needs time. If you're spending the time reading, looking up 2 words per article, you are going to learn vocabulary much quicker than someone who's not doing that. Okay, so don't look up all the words, just look up a few words, 2 words per article. All right, I'm going to teach you another trick. Here's another trick. Today we talked about active listening, right? Now we're going to talk about passive listening. In the previous homework, last lesson's homework, there was a link to Dan Collin, I think that's how you say his name, Dan Collin, Hardcore History Lesson. It's a history podcast. He is the best storyteller I've ever heard, and we're very lucky to have his, hours. I think it's like 40 hours of history stories being narrated to you. He's a great speaker. My point is not to sit and actively listen. My point is you take one of his hardcore podcasts, you turn it on in the background, and you do the dishes. You clean the floor, you make the bed in the morning. It doesn't matter how long you do it for. The point is to get into the habit of passively listening to English in your life, to have moments in your life where English is part of your surroundings. The reason this works, passive listening works because the human brain has no filter. All information is inserted into your brain. The reason that I will always learn Korean better than someone in America who's just practicing with a book, I will be a better Korean speaker than they are because Korean is part of my daily environment. I hear it when I'm not listening. Immersion is the best way to learn a language. Your brain has literally zero filter. All the information goes in. If you're actively studying English, if you're using English in your day-to-day with a coworker, with a friend, a foreign friend, then all the passive listening becomes more important to your brain. Your brain won't throw it out. And the more passive listening, the easier it will be for you to understand that language. Now you may say, Kiki, listen. My aunt lived in America for 40 years. Her English is terrible. She can't speak very well. Her grammar is horrible. What are you talking about? She's lived in America for 40 years. Why does she have an accent? Why is her English so terrible? First of all, I'm talking about my aunt. My aunt lived in a Hebrew-speaking community. She spoke Hebrew every day. And second of all, her English is not terrible. She can read and she can understand English perfectly like a native. She didn't practice speaking. It wasn't important to her in her life. So she can do it. It's just not that important to her, so she doesn't do it with a lot of effort. Her vocabulary is very high. 40 years in America, she can read any novel, no problem. Her speaking ability, her recall is weaker, but she can understand everything that you say in English. No problem at all. She would never have been able to do that if she didn't live there. Never. If she had lived in Israel her whole life, she wouldn't have been able to learn English to the level of a native, even though her speaking is not native level. Okay, so passive listening, just you put it on in the background, you're not paying attention. The same thing is true for watching English-speaking movies with your language subtitles. A lot of people say, how can that help? I'm not actively listening. Again, your brain now has 2 inputs. One input is the audio, they're hearing the English, and the second input is the language, you're reading the language, your language. Those connectors are still being made in your brain, very powerful connectors because there's 2 of them now. A lot of people I know have learned how to speak a foreign language by watching it in English and reading the subtitles in their own language. That's a great way to improve and maintain your level of English. Okay. But a movie takes 2 hours, a TV show takes half hour, and you're paying attention because you're reading the subtitles. Passive listening, just you put it on in the background and you do something else. You're not actively listening. Okay? So that's 3 ways to improve your English skills. There is one more way. The last way is to write. Problem with writing is you need to write to someone. So, as I mentioned before in almost all my lessons, is you need an app like Hello Talk or Language Exchange or something like that, where you're writing to a native. And that's when you take those 2 vocabulary words that you learned per article and you try to use them in a sentence. The native is there to help you make sure you're using it correctly. And in a lot of those apps, you can record yourself speaking, so you can practice the pronunciation of difficult vocabulary. The reason that I mentioned vocabulary in this episode is because the next episode I will be talking about humor. Humor is one of those things that needs vocabulary to be able to use it better. You need a bigger vocabulary. The next lesson depends on you watching the video that I will put in a link to the video. You have to watch it before you watch the lesson. All right, so look at the comments below, find the video for the next lesson, and I'll also put it in the comments below for the next lesson. So watch the video and then check out how you can be funny. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Don't forget, try, make mistakes, and keep going. Bye, guys.